Hello, my name is Conrad Allen. I'm the youngest member of this family that you are about to see. They are members of the same family, and they have a common thread in the things that they tell us in this little presentation. That is that they do have a genuine love for their family. You will not hear my voice again in this presentation. I chose not to speak, partly because of one of the things that will be mentioned in the talk. That is that the youngest member of a family, although they may have a lot to say, is as a blowing wind. I would like to thank my grandson, Keaton Allen, for putting this message together for us. I think he did a splendid job. The next voice you hear will be the voice of my brother Wells, who will take you through the rest of this program. Thank you very much. I hope you enjoy it.
On this tape are 4 versions of the same trip taken to southern Arizona, September 23rd and 24th, 1986. This recording was made on October 7th, 1986. Philip, tell us your version of the trip.
It was a family trip. From where I sat, this is factual. Wells and Conrad counted their money and found they had some left over after taxes. Conrad talked to Kay Jean. He asked her what she might like to spend it on. Kay couldn't think of a thing she didn't already have. Howsomever, there was a secret desire she had had for many years. She conceived in her mind something that may help her obtain it. She conclusified that if she helped the family enjoy an outing, that the way for her to have her heart's desire may be prospectified. She knew Deese was in the same position and possibly the same condition. She contacted Deese, and together they inspired their husbands to make a gift of a trip to family. Family accepted. We traveled on 2 buses. They were driven by Conrad and Wells. One purpose of the trip was to visit all the old haunts of our forefathers and reminisce their pioneer experiences. However, first of all, we visited the monument of Tom Mix, because he was family. Adopted, but family. Miles away in the desert, we spotted which at the time was a mere speck. We traveled on and on straight toward it. It turned out to be the ancient home of the Hohokam Indians, long ago extinct. So you can imagine the welcome when we got there. Welcome indeed, very much different when we arrived at Avalon's palace in Tucson. She prepared a leg of lamb with many exclusive accessories, and we were all filled. We paid her with hugs and kisses and sped off for the Mexican border. Vera was heard to prophesy that as a family, we may never travel this way together again. That did it. We decided to celebrate, inspired by a drunk Indian in Tucson. We stopped where we found the Indian and filled ourselves to the top with malts and ice cream. Oh, how we did all scream with that ice cream. Fay was heard to say, if it be her last trip in that direction, she wanted to be loaded, that is, with good things to eat and drink. Wells headed straight for the border. Conrad did too. Before we got there, we had to go through St. David. We stopped by the church across from a grocery store. Fay and Dees went to the store and bought candy. Conrad went back and forth several times into the church. When asked why, he replied that he was looking for honey. Whose he did not say. Fay and Dees returned eating lollipops, and they offered licks here and there. We must have spent a short hour looking for McDonald, but no one was old enough to ever have heard of the old town. Time was a wasting, so we headed for Curtisville, down on the old San Pedro. We found where Uncle Jody lived and the wilderness that once was Mother's birthplace. With nothing else to do, someone decided to show off shooting pistols at a hubcap Conrad placed on top of a fence post up on a clay cliff. Dees fired 4 clips and didn't throw up any dust. I don't know if she was firing blanks or if she was hitting the target dead center. Elba exclaimed she had never shot a gun, so she was allowed to fire a few rounds. She must be a direct descendant of the old mafia. She exploded every shot dead center in that target. It must have moved her to greatness. She went into the brush, fell down, and returned fresh as a daisy. Wells started shooting and Conrad started shaking. Wells is the one that shot himself one time. Conrad got into the car. We followed him, and he took off so fast he forgot his own pistol and shells on the top of the car. He later saw Wells in his car along the road. Conrad returned and retrieved his artillery. We headed for Mexico again. We got down to Don Luis and found the ruins that were once the telephone office where Mama worked. Conrad and Wells took measurements and pictures, while the rest of us were damn near to dirty our pants. We got back on the road looking for a thick bush, a privy, a big rock, or a restroom, or any kind, anything. How I wished it was dark. We discovered ourselves in Bisbee, got gas at Circle K. We finally stopped at a honky-tonk. I should have kept a better eye on Woe. We were all relieved of our excess weight, and then we started down the road again. I wondered why we went into Bisbee 3 times before we headed for Safford. I still don't know. We finally got out of Bisbee and headed east. Wells stopped to the side of the road several times. Finally, a highway patrol car started tailing us. Otherwise, we may still be stopped out there. Wells explained where we were several times. I was too tired to argue, but I knew damn well he was lost. He kept wanting to turn back to Bisbee again. Was it the red lights? Finally, he pulled into a service station. The man pointed out the way and said, "Este lado." Wells kept insisting, "Otro lado." Vera finally took Wells in hand and got him going down the road with instructions, "No right-hand turns, only left-hand turns." Wells had been over the road many times before, both coming and a-going, but this time he didn't know if he was a-coming or a-going. I felt sorry for Wells. He was steering the car, but Vera was driving. A question in my mind kept popping up. What happened at that bar? We finally arrived at a sign with an arrow pointing to Safford. We crossed the highway and we were picking up speed. Sudden like, Wells stopped and waited our pull-up alongside. Kay Jean said, "See, he's going to tell us he was right all along. He won't admit that he was wrong." Well said. You see, it was like I said. Conrad didn't wait to hear any more. In a cloud of dust of his own making, he went around Wells and took the lead. Kay Jean gave a big sigh of relief. Somehow we arrived at the roadhouse, where we were quartered for the night. Deese and Wells had their TV turned up so high the rest of us could hardly get to sleep. 6 a.m. the next morning, I was awakened abruptly by Elba. She said, "Get up! It's past time for your exercise." So up and around the dorm several times, then breakfast next door. Steak and eggs with fresh buttermilk and toast, just like Mama used to make. We waited about 3 hours for Wells and Deese to get up and have their postum and toast. If they had gone to bed and gone to sleep instead of playing so late, we'd have been on our way long before. Vera had a request that we look up Elton Morris. She didn't say why. We later learned one reason was that Elton and Cliff were thick as thieves in some secret cult or other arrangement. Fay, as we all knew, wanted to find Leif. She also wanted to see Joe. Wells didn't much want to look up Leif because he didn't want to lay over another day while Fay prepared another food basket for her and Leif. We were surprised to find the cistern with sand and charcoal purifier intact at the site of the old farmhouse. The crapper where Wells used to sit and dream till I hit it with a rock or two was gone. It probably washed away when the reservoir broke and let the water flood down the ditch. Vera and Fay walked about searching for mementos of the past. Wells found part of a butcher knife he treasures very highly. Deese took it in custody immediately with the expression, "a real treasure." We visited the old store at Swift Junction where Grandpa lived and became the owner of a woman who guaranteed herself for $10 worth of groceries. When we were all dancing because we needed to go, we went to Roper's Lake. Here we saw Dad's dream was fulfilled. Hunger drove us back to Safford where we had lunch with the Bellmans and the Krupps. Then on to Pima where we found the Historical Society closed. On the way to Pima, we of course went by Grandma's old place and her new place. Fay and Vera were kept together in one car or the other during the whole trip. They repeated themselves very often in their conversation. It was probably due to their changing cars. They thought at each change they had a new audience. Most of their conversation was about Elton and Leif. Rather depressing, eh? What? Kay Jean was still crocheting, trying to be a lady and keep her mouth shut. I had promised to help her get membership in the family. I told her full membership would be difficult to come by, but I could help her achieve a resemblance in due time. I confided to her that a closed mouth would be more desirable on her part on account of her not being a birth member of the family. Also, it didn't help to learn so many Smiths were in the Tombstone Cemetery. But we would try to bring her to membership status when Vera and Fay were not feeling too well, or when they possibly had too much to drink, or were high over their success in a rook game. I also concluded she would have to improve on her rook game. Cheating without being caught was indispensable, imperative. One must be cautious, however, I warned her. Fay could have lost her membership when Deese caught her playing a third rook in one hand. All that saved her was the fact she was a born member. Conrad was helping Kay be quiet the whole trip. He wanted to help her achieve this life ambition. At the Tombstone Cemetery, each time someone shouted, "Another Smith!" With a tear in his eye and his arm about her shoulders, he soothed and cautioned her, "Shh, shh, shh." I think Vera was taking some kind of dope along with a Diet Coke solution. She took a downer to sleep, but Fay said it didn't keep her from talking. Conrad took us all to Guayos in Miami. The food was excellent. Conrad wanted us to know he had been there before as part of his courtship with Kay Jean. Having satisfied our hunger and our curiosity about each other, we headed west where we could find peace and quiet in our own homes.
Vera, tell us your version.
On September 23rd, about 9 a.m., Philip and Elba, Wells and Deese, Conrad and Kay, and Fay and I left Mesa for a trip through the southeast part of Arizona, where our parents spent most of their young lives. There were 2 cars, one driven by Conrad, the other driven by Wells. I must say that they both drove very well. Fay and I moved from one car to the other several times so we could keep things going smoothly. We drove to the Casa Grande ruins, where we walked around and clicked some cameras. And from there we went to Florence and drove by the state prison. We were not allowed to take pictures nor enter the prison. From there we drove to Tucson, where we enjoyed a wonderful brunch at Avalon's. She served us with orange juice, muffins, cantaloupe, a very delicious cheese chili souffle, and fresh brewed coffee for anyone who wanted it. Also, she had a beautiful leg of lamb. It was very enjoyable. Avalon looked great, and it was fun to visit her in her gorgeous home. She gave each of us gals a large tube of hand and body lotion, and we enjoyed that very much. We went to Tombstone and saw the Boot Hill Cemetery. We went to Bisbee, Don Louis, and Naco, where Mama and her sisters worked in the telephone offices. In Don Louis, the building still stands where Grandma Allen and Mama lived and ran a stage-stop restaurant in the front of the building while Dad worked in the mines. We visited a cemetery in St. David and drove to Curtis Flat, where Mama and spent most of her childhood years. It is a peaceful and lovely place. Wells got lost in Bisbee and kept driving through the hotel area where red lights were glowing everywhere. He finally found a Circle K where they bought gasoline. There were no rest areas, nor were there any restrooms anywhere, and Philip was really becoming panic-stricken. We drove on to Wilcox, where Wells stopped to ask about directions. The Mexican he talked to kept waving his arm to the left, and Wells kept waving his arm to the right. Needless to say, Wells finally found the right road, and we arrived in Safford about 10 p.m. The motel was wonderful. We were all very ready for the luxury of our rooms. We all rested very well. Tuesday morning, we had continental breakfast at our motel. Then about 9:30, we drove out to Lebanon or Cactus Flat, where we all lived from time to time while growing up. We looked over the old home site and took pictures. We talked to Mr. Reese and Delton Morris, whose trousers were dangerously close to falling down. I was so worried about his pants that I couldn't hear what he was saying. Wells and Conrad finally managed to get away from this relative of ours. It was awesome. We drove around the area where Dad once had an artesian well and Grandpa had a store. We drove into the park, which is beautiful with lakes and trees and restrooms. This is just a few feet from Dad's property line. He would have loved the park. We then drove to Safford, where we enjoyed lunch at the Tiki restaurant. We drove out through Lone Star, Solomon, and San Jose. The Curtis family had several home places in San Jose. As we went through Thatcher on our way home, we saw the last home Mom and Dad lived in Thatcher, Aunt Nancy's home, and our home place where the house burned down. Grandma Allen's last home still stands and has been added to. I loved seeing it. We saw the Eastern Arizona College and the new church buildings. It's all very new and different. We drove home through Globe and Miami, where we stopped for burros. Our trip home was cool and enjoyable. I love to travel when it's raining. We arrived home about 7:30 p.m. Conrad and Kay and Wells and Dee should feel very proud of the lovely trip they took us on. I loved it.
Faye, you tell us about the trip.
Well, according to my memory, we left Vera's house in Mesa at 8:45 a.m. on the 22nd of September. In the first car was a van, Wells and Deese and Philip and Elba, and Wells was driving. The second car, a Suburban, Conrad, Kay, Vera, and Faye, and Conrad driving. It was a beautiful, cool morning, some clouds and a blue sky. The first stop we made was Casa Grande Ruins, and then on to Tom Mick's Monument and Florence State Penitentiary. We followed the Catalina Mountains to Tucson, and Avalon had brunch ready and waiting. It was beautiful. Ice-cold orange juice, delicious cantaloupe, cheese chili souffle, hot muffins, butter and jelly. It was most delicious and a touch of elegance. We all enjoyed her beautiful home, her love and hospitality. Vera left her a slice of Texas chocolate cake, and Elba gave her a beautiful big apple. Avalon gave each lady a tube of special hand cream. We left Avalon's about 1:50 p.m., and our next stop was St. David Cemetery. We found many family members there and also family friends. We visited Curtis Flats, where Melton Curtis's house still stands. On through to Benson and Douglas and St. David, remembering Aunt Hattie's family that lived there. I hope Philip will write it all in detail. The San Pedro River, where Mama talked about when she was a girl. She loved the river and the flowers that grew there. Fort Chuka Mountains and the fort, and on to Tombstone. The main street is named Allen Street. We visited Boot Hill Graveyard. We didn't find any relatives. But downtown Bisbee was fascinating, not at all as I remembered it. It was old, tall buildings, built tall and narrow, and lots of windows, some in use yet. The streets were narrow, and the huge copper mine above seemed like a canyon of buildings. We were lucky to find a 7-Eleven store and gas pumps, and looking for a service station. Don Louis came next, where Grandma Allen and Mama cooked and fed stagecoach drivers and passengers. On to Naco, where Mama, Aunt Hattie, Aunt Stella all worked in the telegraph office. I couldn't find the building Mama once told me was the place, but things change. They fall down and disappear. However, the flag and the flagpole are still there. Naco is the border, so there is a Naco, Arizona, and a Naco, Mexico. We did not cross the border. It was getting dark, so we all had a sandwich, cold drink, and some Texas chocolate cake Vera and I had taken along, and drove through a gentle rain to Safford, where Wells had arranged for our night's lodging at a new St. Regis motel. It was very nice, new, and clean. We all went to bed quick. It was between 10 and 11 p.m. and had been a long, exciting day. Lots of laughs and fun and teasing. Tuesday, September 23rd, everyone up and able. Vera and I had heard voices about 7:30 a.m. and we bounced out and showered and dressed and joined the gang for continental breakfast. Then we boarded our Suburban and started out. Another beautiful semi-cloudy day, everything fresh from a shower of rain. The chaparral smelled so strong and nostalgic. It was a delicious day. We circled all the locations where we had lived, and some were familiar, some completely changed. The Grimm County Courthouse looked right and proper, Old Glory flying high. Altogether, we put everything straight in our memories and remembered it as it once was. Cook's Drug and Crandall's Drug and a few other places on Main Street haven't changed. At least we could fill in the in-betweens with all our brothers' input. I'm amazed. It amazed us all how Wells knew where everything was and could fill in all the stories and happenings of days gone by. He remembers names the rest of us have long forgotten. He was a wonderful guide to all places of interest, great and small. The people who were our friends and our neighbors, he could recall every one as we each added our own memories. We traded seats often, so everyone had a change of stories and so forth. The old schoolhouse, church, and so forth, has been made into a home. It looks good and comfortable. We all added our great memorable experiences there. Turned into our lane, the road runners were still there to greet us. We visited George Rees. He is 79 years old, uses a walker, but looks great and has a good outlook. Was happy to see all of us and visit a bit. We walked up the hill and all around the old reservoir where Arvy was baptized, maybe Avalon too, we weren't sure. It's all so familiar, and the mesquite and the chaparral are so green and fragrant. I could see the cars coming out from town as Vera and I used to watch, hoping they would turn in our lane. The old head gate is still there, coming out of the reservoir, and the ditch still shows. As we crossed the road to where the house stood, there was Key's ditch that had been so important to us. It has been cemented, but it still has a trickle of water running in it. We could remember wash days and play days on that tiny ditch where Mama washed our clothes and kept us clean. There's still some house foundation, and the old cistern is still standing. We were happy to find some landmarks left for us to ponder. Connie took lots of pictures, and some of us talked on a tape to add to the fun. On down the lane to where Dick and I lived. Dick built a 2-room house and a wonderful fireplace where we lived when Manny was just a toddler, and we raised ducks on the pond. We leased this 40 acres and had farmed it for about 2 years before we left for California. We lived here when Manny swallowed a button, which he carried in his throat for 5 months before spitting it out into my hand, having loosened it by eating carrots from the truckload that Dad had parked in the yard, and we were all eating carrots. What a glorious, happy day for all. Here we met and visited with Delton Morris. He remembered Dick and all our family. He now owns the ranch where Dick, Manny, and I lived. We drove up to Dad's artesian well and remembered the day we all rushed up to see it come in. The well is capped now, but still stands. Swift's Trail service station is still there, but is much changed. I remember the day when President Harvey L. Taylor, Mac, and Brother Wallace and I stopped there to find Mama, Arvy, and Avalon tending the station. President Taylor bought gasoline and bananas to eat on our way to the Fort Grant for a program meeting. We drove through the beautiful Roper Lakes State Park, ducks and birds everywhere, a lovely setting, so wonderful to see water where once was only desert. Back to Safford for lunch, delicious chow mein at Contiki's. Serviced cars at the Whiting service station on the ground once owned by our dad, across from Aunt Nancy's and Uncle Eve's. Dad's, this is the place, is still in service, but doesn't look as it used to. Many memories there. Drove by Grandma Allen's house, Grandma Curtis's place. Her house is gone and another in its place. Aunt Stella's still there with the pomegranates growing along the row between the houses. Saw where our home burned down and lovely new homes built there now. Woods' old outdoor theater we all loved, where the big black bear was chained in the yard. All around, old Gila Junior College to us. Now, Eastern Arizona College. Beautiful new modern buildings, lovely homes and prosperous looking. Across the big ditch, still running muddy, looks like cocoa as always. Many landmarks still stand there, the post office and the college inn and so forth. It's getting late afternoon, so we head for home. Pima and Central, many memories, and the Red Knolls and so forth. Fort Thomas, the Indian Hot Springs, all the memories we have of the Indian Reservation flashed back and across our minds, and the dances at Bylas and Rice and Globe and Miami. We stopped at Conrad's request in Miami for burros. They were delicious. Then on home through a quiet rain, up over the mountain to the top of the world where we spent a summer, and we each remembered hearing a radio for the first time. Down the mountain to Superior and the Junction, each one relating many experiences with Dad in the wagon and team, camping out, seeing old roads, lots of stars, and many wonderful memories filled with love and excitement. Such a wonderful, joyous experience for each of us. Deese, Kay, and Elba were so patient. They let us ramble on and on. They all They are loved by each of us, and I hope that they have enjoyed it all too. We missed Arvella and Avalon and look forward to another time when we can go on again. Thanks to Wells and Conrad for their time, their generosity, patience, and all the planning and preparation for 2 days of joyous remembering of our childhood and all days before and after. It was wonderful. Thanks to our loving parents for the many happy memories they gave us and for the love they instilled in our hearts for one another.
This is Wells. It is now my chance to get a word in edgewise. 2 days of being overruled and shushed by my older brother and 2 older sisters has caused me to be dodge-headed and somewhat silent, so I'm giving the correct account of our trip to Naco. Younger brother Conrad and his wife Kay were in the other car, and despite my empathy for them, their being unable to voice their opinion for 2 days would make them feel incarcerated, to say the least, and that is all they could do. Deese had been programmed by me ahead of time, so she expected to remain silent most of the time. We headed south from Mesa through the Sacatone Indian Reservation and stopped at the old home of Father Kino and the Hohokam Indians of long ago. It is now known as the Casa Grande Ruins and is a national park installation. Restrooms were welcome and also a drink of water from the hydrants. A half-hour visit made it 10 o'clock when we headed out to Florence, where we viewed the penitentiary from a distance. We were surrounded by more cops than sparrows could land on a cow chip. No pictures, or they would keep us inside indefinitely. So much for the stories of Grandpa as the night watchman and Winnie Ruth Judd as the inmate. Tom Mick's monument received a moment of silence except for Kay Jean trying to get in her 2 cents during the pause in conversation. As we neared the Catalina Mountains, the Kit Peak Observatory came into view, and we knew Tucson was just ahead. Confusion by Conrad, being told directions by Philip, Vera, and Faye was expected, so I finally had to take over and show them how to get to Avalon's. By now, Elba no doubt feels she is in a circus with a bunch of clowns who don't know which way is up. In wisdom, she brought out enough delicious apples to quieten everyone. Avalon is beautiful as well as her home. She had prepared the victuals fit for queens and kings, and the reception we received made us feel we wanted to stay forever. Quickly we put on the morales, or feed bags, and devoured the delicious food. Silence for a moment was golden. After an exchange of memento gifts and a half hour of yak-yak, we were on our way again south to St. David. A yearning to go back to Avalon's, or it may have been to return to Grandma Allen's, because her home was so inviting, clean, and loving. Grandma and Avalon are a lot alike that way. The workman repairing the church in St. David had never heard of a place called McDonald's, so we went on to the St. David Cemetery. The headstone of Diantha Hanchett Gardner brought back memories of Grandma Curtis, because this was her mother. Many other relatives were interred there as well. On to Curtis Flats, we stopped in front of Milton's house. It was locked at the gate, so we didn't go on around the brush to the old home place where Mama and I had gone 16 years ago. We drove farther up toward the hill and circled back around to try and approach the old home from the rear. We settled for going up close to the point of the hill where Mama had played as a child. We all seemed to engulf the feel of the pleasant place to play, and for a few moments did our playing, and by eating the chocolate cake Vera had made and the delicious apples Elba brought. Then we engaged in target practice using the same old hill as a backstop for the targets. I think Mama was there too. At the Boot Hill Cemetery in Tombstone, Philip teased Kay Jean about how many of her Smith relatives were there, so we had to leave. On Main Street, or I should say Allen Street, we checked up on the Birdcage Theater, the Palace Bar, then off to our left on a side street was the Epitaph, or printing office. This left may have sparked controversy later in the day, as you shall realize farther on down the road. The tunnel going into Bisbee was well lighted, but it made us realize the sun was going down and we must hasten on our way if we were to see much more in daylight. We rather bypassed the main drag of Bisbee and slowed to view the open-cut copper mine called the Lavender Pit near the Warren turnoff. At Don Louis, 5 miles south of Bisbee, it became necessary for me to prove, by asking a Mexican lady in the presence of Vera and Fay, that the now Mexican Cafe was at one time an old bar, and prior to that, the stagecoach stop where Grandma Allen and Mama served and prepared food for the stagecoach driver and his passengers, while Dad worked in the mine at Cananea, 35 miles south in Mexico. The lady verified my statements as fact. It's amazing how older brothers and sisters will take a Mexican's word for things and treat the words of a younger brother as though the wind is blowing. As we journeyed toward Naco on the Mexican border, we were amazed to see off to our left, watch out for the word left, the lime mine in full operation. After several people told us in Naco that they didn't know where the old telegraph office was, a 63-year-old Mexican lady showed us where it used to be, and only a cement slab remained of the old 2-story building. Pictures will be all we have to trigger our thoughts of where Mama, Stella, and Hattie worked as telephone operators during the latter part of the 1890s. Restroom time was putting the pressure on us, so we headed back to Bisbee in search of. Where Brewery Gulch intersects Tombstone Canyon, the main street of Bisbee, we stopped in front of the theater. Straight in front of us was the Copper Queen Hotel. The red lights on the second balcony caused Kay Jean to exclaim, "Oh my lordy, they've made it into a cat house." Up Tombstone Canyon for long miles, crooked too, we came to a Circle K and gasped. I mean that actually. No restroom and no pun intended. They told us to go 1 mile back down the road to the public park for a restroom. Philip said if he didn't need to go number 2, he'd go in the alley. It was real dark and we couldn't find any park, so we headed east to the turnoff north to Elfrida. Vera was dead set against going to Douglas. No jackasses were on the road, which was a real surprise to me because they had always been there before to greet me as I drove down the road. 5 miles north from the left turn, watch the word left, we stopped at a bar and restaurant. It looked inviting, and eureka, maybe a restroom. The restaurant was closed, so the bar was utilized for all necessary deposits. Now everyone was hungry again, so we ate the delicious sandwiches Faye had brought along. They saved our lives. Just why Conrad loaded up and took off in such a hurry, I don't know, but we caught up 7 miles down the road. After passing Elfrida, a patrol car stayed close behind Conrad until it turned off to Kansas Settlement. We turned off on the first exit en route to Wilcox and stopped at a service station near where I operated a service station in 1937. A Mexican attendant tried to tell me we must turn left to go to Safford. Vera, Fay, Philip, Conrad, and Kay Jean all had told me before that we must turn left to get to Safford, and now it all started again. Elba and Deese didn't scold me, but everyone else did. Finally, I said BS, meaning Boy Scout, and turned right. I told Philip and Conrad that the Dos Cabezas were off to the right, and they looked, even though it was pitch dark. After 2 right turns, we turned north on Highway 666, then on into Safford. No one even had the courtesy to tell me how right I was. The Regis Inn had been built recently out in the cotton field, once owned and farmed by Ed and Ellis Hoops. They had purchased it in their names with money Grandpa Curtis had, and Mama was left without a penny of it. However, we were happy to find our beds ready and the toilets in good working order. It was after 10 o'clock and the rest of the party was tired, so we hit the sacks. At the crack of dawn, I was awakened by a braying sound mixed with a Tarzan bellow, being made by someone trying to sound like a coyote. Next came a pound of a gorilla on the door, then I knew who it was. No one brought me breakfast, just scolding me to get up and go, go, go. I was able to scrounge one lone donut, and we headed for Cactus Flat. By 9:30, we were at George Reese's place, so we stopped to pay our respects. Memory flashes showed me the 5-gallon keg of white mule we had taken over to George's and converted to Tom and Jerry's. The music we made, and Dad's coming to break up the party. I could see Philip putting Arvella on his back and with Avalon under his arm, running down the road to catch the bus, which I had run on ahead to hold until they got there. I saw Lula out beside the building. A fast nickel beats a slow dime, looking for Grandpa Allen by use of some binoculars. I saw the peanut plants growing in the field behind the house where George now lives. I saw the beets growing, the watermelon and cantaloupe vines with Arvella, Avalon, and Mama turning the runners out of the row so the water would not rot the fruit. Many other things I saw, I cannot tell. Mr. Cochran has built a nice home on top of the hill where I once played. Although the hill has shrunk, the memories are large and vivid still. He gracefully allowed us to look and take pictures of the reservoir, the head gate, and the whole area to our heart's content. Across the road is the remains of the old home place where Dad would stand on the back steps and shoot the jackrabbits eating the crops 20 acres away, sometimes 40 acres away. The cistern we dug to receive the mountain water so our teeth wouldn't turn brown from drinking the artesian water was still there, and the cement we covered the walls with had stayed as though forever. We drove on down to the old Spears place where Fay and Dick made their home for a few years. The game chickens nor the beehives were there. The house was long gone, but the duck pond and Elton Morris, the new owner, was there. I'll leave that story for Vera and Philip to tell, since he is their relative. Roper Lake State Park should be named Orville Allen Lake State Park. It was Dad's dream that he hoped for and worked so hard to have come about. It is a beautiful development, even if it does eliminate my trapping and hunting areas. We turned off the highway toward Old Man Underwood's. On that corner still stands the old home of Lehigh Smithson, where we stopped for hot chocolate and cake while caroling at Christmas time. Dad would put a tub of hot coals in his truck to keep us warm under the covered bows of the truck. We stopped at the first artesian well which Dad had dug by Buck Cash and Brig Elmer in exchange for the old iron-body truck we used for so many years. The well casing still protrudes from the ground, but it has been capped. Old Man Staley and Dottie Boggs lived near the next turn. We went on by the place where Pratt and Aunt Nora Tenney lived. Behind their place was the old cemetery. Ezra Farron lived kitty-cornered across from Pratt and Nora. The last place we lived in at Cactus was located where we re-entered Highway 666. The family left for California from this place in 1934 and never returned. 2 miles south, we stopped at the old site of the famous Tanner Well, where we took 10-gallon cans to get water for our domestic use. Our drinking water we brought from Safford or from the cistern. The Swift Trail Junction holds so many memories, I'll leave them for another writing. Again being pressured, I joined our choice group for eats at the Kontiki restaurant in Safford. Of all great places to eat, Conrad insisted on this Chinese joint. As if this wasn't enough, we had to go to Salmonville and see the old ruins of the Michelena Market, which had been the first office of the now famous Valley National Bank, then Shorty's Cafe, now Ashes, and the old building of Fred Blake Grocery. A lot of things were being said that I was not privy to in our group, so I just kept on heading for San Jose, where Dad and Mama were wed. Philip remembered the old ruins of the San Jose Mexican dance hall, but had trouble locating Ammon's or Tom's old home places until he saw his relative, Roy Gardner, drive into Uncle Tom's old place. Grandma Curtis had started the ranches for her family here, but when Grandpa Curtis brought Ellen over, Grandma moved to Thatcher. Not much was said about Delbert and Alec's ranch or even the great San Simon Wash. I guess everyone was ready to head for home, which we did. En route, we viewed the remains of the old home place in Thatcher. This is the place. Aunt Nancy's old home, the Gila College, the Relief Society Hall, the place where I was baptized, where the house burned down, Grandma Allen's old homes, Grandma Curtis's old home, and many other memorable sites. Between Globe and Miami, we followed Conrad's lead toward Roosevelt Dam for a long way. Just when I was about to give up and let him go on, he turned into a burro restaurant. Everyone out for restroom and a burro. It was good. With everyone except me still yakking, we arrived in Mesa at 7:30 p.m., none the worse for wear. It was a beautiful trip, and I look forward to going to Luna Valley real soon with all the same crew, and possibly Avalon and Arvella will join us. The Lord, with the help of our parents, has abundantly blessed us.